Okay, we're live, so hold on. Just want to turn this off. Okay, we're live, so hold on. We're live. This off. This off. We're live, so hold on. Live, so hold on. Live, live, live.
All right, guys. So first off, I'm connecting in the new microphone, but before we do that, I'm going to introduce my guest here. This is King Peachy.
Hello, everyone. New to the channel. Can't wait to discuss some topics with everyone.
Okay, so we are beginning momentarily. You guys, so first off, okay, I'm connecting in the new microphone, but before we do that, okay, so we are live here at movie. Hold on. Okay, one second. All right, guys. One sec. One sec. 1 second. All right. All right. Hold on. Just configuring a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more. And we are live. So, hello, guys. Welcome to Movie Talk Now. This is going to be the first live stream we have done here, well, in a while. And we're going to be talking about some hot topics. First, of course, like we talked about, Zack Snyder versus James Gunn. But I want to introduce my guest here. He's a new YouTuber starting a new channel. So first off, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hello, everyone. I'm King Peachy. New to the channel. Like he said before, I'm going to start my new channel. Basically, just talking about video games, movies, comics, all the sorts of stuff. So I figured there's a great. We're gonna have several topics to discuss here, and I figured we could start with the first one.
All right, so the first topic, of course, is James Gunn versus Zack Snyder. That has been the hottest situation going on in the DC fandom. And I wanted to give my thoughts on it, and we're going to ask our guest his thoughts on it. But first, just a little bit of a background on the subject. Some of you guys may already know what happened on this month, October. Zack Snyder, former Man of Steel director, former director of Zack Snyder's Justice League, and former engineer of the DCEU, in my opinion, took a shot at James Gunn's DC universe. He uploaded a photo of Henry Cavill Superman, which of course is fine. It was the caption that created a fury, an online whirlwind that honestly people are still talking about it. The post has over 800,000 likes on Instagram, but it has millions and millions and millions of views. And the videos that we have talked about it on, there's so much engagement. Everyone has an opinion, but let's break it down. First off, instead of saying something like my Superman or Henry Cavill is my Superman or take a look at the a flashback in the past to Superman, um, you know, hold on one moment. I'm taking. Okay, so keep that in mind. So with Henry Cavill Superman, uh, sorry about that. Just had a quick interruption. My guest had to step out. But with Henry Cavill as Superman being stated, he's basically saying, look, David Corn Sweat is not Superman. David Corn Sweat is not Superman. That was my take on the situation. My take on the situation was that, okay, hold on. We're gonna lower the echo. All right, guys, let us know in the comments section if there's a strong echo. I was just told that there's a little bit of an echo, so let me know, guys, if you see an echo. And of course, we're going to be checking in on Jesus. Sorry about that, friend. So, okay, hold on. So let me know, guys, in the comments if you are noticing any type of echo. Again, this is one of our newer live streams. But again, when it comes to James Gunn and Zack Snyder, Zack Snyder, shot that initial shot, which began a world storm, and everyone is talking about it. But it was interesting what happened afterwards, right? It was interesting what happened afterwards. Hold on, guys. I apologize. Yeah, yikes. I apologize about that, guys. All right. I'm so sorry about that, friend. So, Jesus, I just had a phone call. Again, this is my first live stream in a while. Be patient with some of the technical situations. We're going to make sure that some of this stuff does not happen on the next live streams. This is going to be a weekly or bi-weekly occurrence. We're going to have different live streams going on talking about the hottest subjects in blockbuster fandoms. Okay. So what was interesting was after Zack Snyder posted that image, which went viral everywhere. Okay. It absolutely went viral. The next thing that happened was he posted a photo of Deathstroke. And the caption was a lot more liberal. It was a lot more, he was a lot more careful. Okay. He was a lot more careful. However, what happened next is what really escalated the war between Zack Snyder and James Gunn's community. Joe Manganiello, the actor for Deathstroke, literally reshared a post that said, "Restore the Snyderverse. Restore the Snyderverse." That means he has officially declared war on James Gunn's DC universe, not just by saying sell the not just by saying, "Hey, let's sell the rights." He's saying, "Let's end the DC universe and let's reboot." And it makes sense because Joe Manganiello had a huge role in Zack Snyder's Justice League in part two and part three, even though it was not made. The storyboards are available, and he had a huge role in those movies. And of course, he was the antagonist in uh, the Batman, Ben Affleck's The Batman. So warning shots, firing shots have been, shot across the battlefield. And of course, we are waiting to see if Zack Snyder responds. But a lot of his surrogates have responded to these stories by attacking the Snyderverse, by bringing up old ideas that were unpopular. An example of that is, did you know Wonder Woman and the Amazons were actually going to have Kryptonian DNA. Kryptonian DNA, which totally would have flipped the Amazon lore upside down. So, guys, let me know in the comments here. I'm taking a look here. Let me know in the comments what you guys think about this. I want to know, are you guys on the team of Restore the Snyderverse? Are you guys There we go. So yeah, are you guys on the team of Restore the Snyderverse? Are you guys on the team of let's continue the DC universe? It matters. So I'm reading the comments here, guys. Oh yeah, there's a lot of conversation here. Love it. Oh man, okay. So Zack Snyder, you're saying the other Superman actors don't exist. So what I'm saying is there's a way to say it, and then there's a way not to say it. Okay, guys. And basically, by him showing this photo, there was nothing wrong with him showing this photo and saying, "Check out Superman" or "Take a look at Superman." But by saying Henry Cavill is Superman, shots were fired. Now I want to ask my guest here: do you think Zack Snyder knew what he was doing when he made that caption? Was he trying to rile up his fan base, or was it an innocent post?
Honestly, I've been going back and forth on what was going through his mind in the last week, but also, it was more so even the Deathstroke picture yesterday when he said the best Deathstroke. It seems like he knows specifically what he's doing, and it's happening during a time when Warner Brothers is selling their company, or at least putting their company on for sale. So it's clearly signaling that he has some interest in the comic book universe again. But the question is, do regular moviegoers want that again? In my opinion, it's hard to go back to something that basically failed financially. There are diehard Zack Snyder fans out there that would love to at least have his vision be finished. But the real question is it financially suitable for the company? And one of the main reasons why James Gunn is here is because Zack Snyder's vision failed. So, why would it be financially suitable for them to go back to something that almost put the company in a hole?
And that brings up a really important point and a major story that is happening. Warner Brothers today announced they are officially accepting bids. So the way I worded it before, Warner Brothers was accepting bids, but they weren't officially for sale. It's almost like an off-market house, an off-market property that doesn't have a for sale sign on the front yard, but they're willing to entertain offers. Now they basically have that for sale sign on their front yard saying, "We're interested in being bought. we're interested in bids. Have take a look. And right now, the rumors are Comcast is number one in possibly putting in a very lucrative bid for the Warner Brothers executives. The alternative is Netflix, even though a few weeks ago Netflix shot this down. New reports indicate that they are planning an offer, which is really interesting. And then, of course, Paramount, who already put in a bid testing the waters. It was rejected. But trust me, more bids are coming. And when you take a look at it, I think it's because Warner Brothers Discovery is massively in debt. I mean, I have no idea how much positive revenue they need in order to turn this ship around. They need monumental wins. I mean, they are so far in the hole, they can't even see the sunlight, okay? They are so screwed when it comes to financial debt and their status. So being purchased may be their only option. Now, when purchases happen, oftentimes there is complete overtures. They replace everybody. I mean, take a look at what happened to Fox Century after their acquisition, after they were purchased. Almost all their properties went down. You don't even see the Fox name being used. They basically got swallowed. It wasn't even really a merger. They got swallowed. And there's a major worry. Is that going to happen to Warner Brothers? Are they just going to be swallowed and a lot of their properties are going to be shut down and shelved and they're just really going to be utilized with some of their higher name properties? It's possible. It's possible a company could come in and say, guys, screw all these C characters, D characters. We're gonna fire James Gunn, and I want 30 Batman movies. And the rest of the rest of the DC is only going to be Batman based. This is going to be a Batman universe, and sometimes there'll be cameos only to make money, but no B characters, no C characters, no D characters. So as my guest was saying, Zack Snyder firing these shots during this crucial time is a major decision. It's him saying, look, I know your universe is in trouble. And by trouble, I mean, yes, the people are enjoying the DC universe. If you look at Superman, it's massively popular. No one can deny that. The critic score, extremely high. The audience score, no matter where you go, it is high. When you look at Peacemaker, seasons one, seasons two, overall popular. Creature Commandos had a lower audience, but overall it was popular. And when you look at this poll, I'm going to pull up right here, super important, guys. Look at this. 42,000 people, 42,000 of you guys voted in this poll. Are you excited for the future of the DC universe? 61% said yes. 61%. Only 23% said no. 11% saying they haven't really seen anything yet. So about 34% are about in that either no or indifferent category. And then 5% are undecided. So it's very possible, and I think it's more likely that someone who acquires Warner Brothers is going to try to preserve some of the properties and projects that are happening. So, for example, Harry Potter has a new show coming out. Every season is going to be a year in its school. And I think it's going to do very well. I think it's going to do massively well. And it would be really foolish to even, touch that project. J.K. Rowling's involved. People are saying good things about the scripts. The casting looks phenomenal. Really powerful stuff. Now, when it comes to James Gunn's DC universe, you can see it's a little bit more divided, and you can even see that in the comments right now. People are debating as we speak, but you get the idea. Now, I'm going to ask my guest a very important question. If Warner Brothers Discovery gets purchased, do you think James Gunn is going to keep his job, or do you think they're going to want to reset the DC universe or do a soft reboot?
I think really it depends on Supergirl and Clayface. I don't know if he has any other. I think Green Lantern is also having a series.
Yes, Lanterns has a series that's being released in early 2026.
So right now, James Gunn needs to sell his vision. Right now, Superman did okay, but it did not, you know, bring in the revenue that I think Warner Brothers hoped it did. And then Peacemaker, I was looking at the viewership last night. It had a massive drop after the second episode compared to the season one. So even though it is critically financially a success, viewership was not on par at all with season one, which I think is a big thing. And then being that Superman, what, barely got over 600 million. We have to see. We know that Supergirl is not going to surpass that. So the question is it going to be in the 400, 500, or is it going to be in the subpar 300 million? If I think it personally has to go above 450 to say, okay, it's not Superman, but it did good. And then of course Clayface. I'm one of those people that I love Clayface as a character. I think he's an underrated character, but a lot of people don't know who that is, and I feel like it may flop. I mean, flop hard, even though it doesn't have a big budget. Even with that, even though it has a small budget, I don't even think it's going to make its money back. So the question is, James Gunn has to sell in the next year and a half. And the question is, can he do it? And if he does not do it, I think that gives whoever's the head of Warner Brothers, if they get bought out, their reasoning be like, you know what, we tried it, it's not working. Before we put our billions of dollars into moving on for the next few years, we're just going to reset it before we're too deep into the hole.
So first off, I want my guest to pull up the chat on his phone, just make sure it's muted. I want to see what you guys are saying, and he's going to keep track of the comments. So guys, I want you to engage with us. We're going to be reading your comments in real time. But my guest, King Peachy, who has a YouTube channel coming out soon, we'll be putting that link in the pinned comment and in some of the videos you're going to see coming from this stream. Take a look at the comments of. Okay, hold on. I'm just helping out my guest here. Okay. All right. As you can see, we are live. And can you download the YouTube app? Okay, I'm sorry about that. So basically, as far as the Warner Brothers buying Zack Snyder's DC Universe, or Warner Brothers being purchased, my guest had a very good point that James Gunn has some time, because by the time a purchase happens, and if it does happen, it's going to take about a year. It's going to take a little bit over a year. Okay. So basically, Supergirl will have already happened. Clayface will have already happened. Lanterns will have already happened. And I think there's going to be two things that are going to truly matter. One, public perception is really going to solidify by then. That is three major projects. All three of them do not have James Gunn involved. So this is James Gunn's overarching vision, and we're going to see how it kind of trickles down. Is it going to work? If the fans are not in, that's really bad news for James Gunn. It's horrible news for James Gunn. And in my opinion, if the public perception is bad, say goodbye to the DC universe. Now, my guest wanted to read some comments here.
I do. So I guess I'll say them. This is from South Cali Guy 87. He said the Kryptonian heritage goes to all living human beings on Earth, not just the Amazons. I don't hate the idea. It gives some credence to the whole metahuman thesis brought up in BVC.
Batman versus Superman. So basically, the guest is referring to a comment we made earlier, where Zack Snyder's vision included having the Amazons having DNA from Kryptonians, which explains their massive power. Now, the guest is clarifying, saying all of humans, all of humanity has percentages of Kryptonian DNA, and it's an interesting type of lore. Let me know what you think about that in the comments. If that's something you would have wanted to see explored, or if somehow the Snyderverse is restored or purchased as an Elseworlds story. Do you want to see that element explored? Now, why don't we read some of the other comments?
This from Omar. How do you feel about having Deathstroke as the main villain for Ben Affleck's Batman movie?
So I'm gonna let King Peachy give his opinion, but first, I think Deathstroke is awesome. I love Slade Wilson. I think he would look badass on a poster. He looks cool. He is cool. He has really interesting abilities that, yes, makes him a metahuman, but nothing so crazy that you need, Green Lantern to fight him. It's a Batman level threat, but a real, true threat. Now, what do you think about Deathstroke? Do you think he was an interesting villain? Would you like to see him in James Gunn's DC universe?
I would have loved to see him in the DC universe. Omar also said also here really quick, just going to combine the two things. Do I wish to see Batman and Deathstroke fight each other? Of course. I mean, the thing is, I grew up with Deathstroke, and I'm sure you guys have seen maybe not the young Teen Titans in the early 2000s. That Deathstroke was one of the main villains against Robin. And we all know how strong Deathstroke is, especially in the comics. And I would love to see not just Robin fighting, but Batman. And if I'm not mistaken, is that Deathstroke was the one that killed a lot of Batman's friends and teammates, and that was going to set up for the movies. Basically, what was Batman going to do against someone that really destroyed his family, basically.
Yes, and I wanted to address a really important question by Hunter Iggy, saying, "What is your thoughts on comic book news spreading lies about James Gunn in a hit piece on him?" Let me clarify: it was not comic book news, and this is where that company is really sketchy. It's Cosmic Book News. They're hoping you make a typo when you search comic book news on Google, and they come up and they look like comic book news, and they trick a lot of people. Cosmic Book News is fandom trash. The tabloid magazines you see in supermarkets where they're saying Princess Diana was abducted, they have more credence, they have more credibility than Cosmic Book News. Cosmic Book News is a complete joke. We also had another comment saying, have you guys been discussing the Warner Brothers Discovery sale? And yes, this is part of that conversation. We're basically saying whether or not, if James Gunn's universe is in peril, is in trouble, if it is purchased by one of these companies, because yes, Warner Brothers Discovery is for sale. They made a statement earlier today. They're accepting bids. They're putting that out there, and they want to be purchased. And I think it has to do with their massive debt. And as my guest was saying, and as I was saying, the next three projects coming up, Lanterns, Supergirl, Clayface, they matter. The public reception and the profitability and the merchandise, it matters. It matters a whole lot. So I want you guys, let me know in the comments. My guest here is reading some things. Do you guys want to see Warner Brothers get purchased? Do you want to see the Snyderverse get restored? Now, I want to make one more point about this before we move on. And this is super, super important. I am against the sale of Warner Brothers Discovery. We need less monopolies. We need less monopolies in Hollywood. We need less monopolies in business. We need less monopolies in technologies. We need less monopolies in innovation. And the idea that Warner Brothers may merge with someone like Paramount is disgusting. And just to put things in context, that means Cartoon Network is going to be owned by the same people that own Nickelodeon. There's something inherently wrong about that. I mean, these companies are at their best when they are fighting each other, when they're competing against each other. But when all of these conglomerates start uniting in this giant Hedora slime, disgusting monster, it's not worth it. I mean, what do you think? Do you want to see Warner Brothers change direction? Some people are hoping that they were purchased, but others like me are against it. What do you think?
I agree with you in terms of I think it is important for companies to go head to head because that's how we get interesting ideas. If everyone's bought out and there's no consensus in terms of how would I put this, what's going to do better, Avengers versus Justice League, and then we're going to have the interesting ones like say Supergirl versus I don't know, War Machine or something, more of the obscure characters. But if we're going to have everyone buy out each other, then we're just going to have the head honchos, Superman versus Iron Man, and we're not going to have the more obscure characters. These companies are not going to try and, you know, test the waters with a Clayface or a Supergirl or something. We're not going to get those characters. They're going to be cameos in Justice League, but they're not going to have their own, movies, but this is very important if Warner Brothers get bought out, and I think someone had the question: should Paramount or maybe what company will be a good for Warner Brothers? I actually think Paramount is the best one because they are a smaller company, and I don't think they could just swallow Warner Brothers. I think they're going to be 50-50 just because Warner Brothers to me is more iconic than Paramount. Paramount. What's the streaming service they have? Paramount Plus.
Yes, Paramount Plus.
Paramount Plus is not on par with HBO Max. But the problem with Warner Bros. They're in debt. So I think they're gonna go in a 50-50 merger. Unlike, say, a Disney, if say Disney bought them, they're gonna get swallowed. Or if someone else that's bigger will get, if Amazon or Google gets them, they're gonna get swallowed. But I think Paramount is the only one that, in my opinion, because they are such a smaller company, it will be 50-50, and they're not gonna get swallowed. I think Warner Brothers will still have directives in terms of they could do what they want, but they'll get a bigger backing.
Okay, that's very good points, and I want to address two questions here in the live chat. Movie Talk now, if two of the projects hit for James Gunn's DCU, and I mean if Supergirl and Lanterns hit and Clayface does not, what do you think will happen? Well, first off, this is a really good question, and Clayface is actually a smaller budget movie. They're taking the Godzilla minus one approach. Now, I'm not sure if you remember, but Godzilla minus one was about $13 million, their budget. And just for context, the Marvels was almost $200 million. So you can see the big difference in Hollywood versus some of these smaller films. And in my opinion, Godzilla minus one looks way better than the Marvels and so many of these, blockbuster movies. Now, Clayface, if I remember correctly, is about $50 million. So I think they don't need a lot of money to be successful. But what if it's a failure? Well, I think the DC universe is going to be okay because of the fact it's a smaller budget, it's a smaller risk. But Lanterns and Supergirl, they need to be successful, but more importantly, they need to be a critical reception because whoever leads Warner Brothers in the future, whether it's the same team or somebody else, they're going to want enthusiasm because that is what's going to drive the next 20 years. Next question is I want to see the Snyderverse get finished and in live action, as well as David Ayer's cut of the Suicide Squad. I don't need the Snyderverse restored. I need it to be finished properly. And I want to go on a small rant here, and my guest may appreciate this. He may disagree here. One thing I'm sick of studios is thinking that the audiences are dumb. I think we would be just fine. We would understand everything just fine if, for example, there was multiple Spider-Man movies in different timelines. If Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man had a Spider-Man 4. If Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man had the Amazing Spider-Man 3. If Tom Holland's Spider-Man had Spider-Man Brand New Day. Guess what? I think Sony would be raking in the money. I think they would be flooded in money. They wouldn't even know what to do with all the money that was coming in. But instead, these studios feel like we can't somehow comprehend two different timelines existing at once. And let me make something clear. The animated world does it just fine. And do you really think people watching cartoons have a higher IQ than the general audience? They don't. Audiences will be just fine. So in that respect, I honestly agree. I think the Snyderverse should be completed as Elseworlds projects. You finish Justice League 2, you finish Justice League 3. If Ben Affleck is willing, you greenlight, his Batman movie, solo movie with Joe Manganiello's Deathstroke, and then we say goodbye to the DCEU properly. I wouldn't mind that, but that goes for all the companies. I want to see Spider-Man 4 with Tobey Maguire. I want to see Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man return in the Amazing Spider-Man 3. And I know you guys agree, right? I mean, let me know in the comments. And there were some other comments I wanted to address as well. What will happen to Gunn if WB is sold? And that's what I was saying. It all depends on the next few projects. It all depends on the next few projects. If James, oh, I'm sorry about that, guys. If James Gunn is a hit, if James Gunn is a projects are a hit, he's going to be just fine. But we have three projects happening before this potential acquisition comes through and solidifies. And if it's a total failure, if the audience is not on board, then say goodbye to James Gunn. And those are the two things that could happen and very well could happen. His contract's not up for another year. Yep. And by then, the mergers will either have solidified or will soon solidify. My guest wants to say something.
Actually, before we move on topics, I have a few things to talk about. Going back to, if Clayface fails, but the other two do well, I also agree. I think it'll be fine. I mean, it really depends on Green Lantern because it is a pretty big budget movie, but also Supergirl, I think, is the next big prime movie until whatever the next one. I think probably Batman. You know, Supergirl is based on a graphic novel. It's called Woman of Tomorrow. I actually read it. I bought it last week, and it was actually a very, very good and interesting story. If they can nail that story, I think it will succeed. Green Lantern, I think it's based on the whole all the Green Lantern core, not just one character. If they can have a really good story and not finicky CGI, because we all know what happened with 2011. The story was not great, and the CGI is still made fun of to this day. So they have an imaging problem with Green Lantern. They have not done anything with Green Lantern since then, so they have to turn it around with that one. And then number three is you know Clayface has a budget of 50 million. I'm actually going to compare it not to Godzilla minus one, but more to Deadpool, which had 60 million. It's very on par. We all know how successful Deadpool was, and obviously he's still around to this day, a decade later. So can Clayface, double that? If say it gets 100 to 120 million, that's basically doubling it. And then that's not even counting worldwide. Worldwide it could be three, four, 500 million, and at that point it's six times over its budget. And then right there, we're gonna see Clayface all over. And then the last thing is, can there be multiples of one character? We do have the Batman 2 coming out, and we know that James Gunn has his own Batman. If they're both successful, that basically answers the question. But James Gunn's version of Batman has to be good. And if that's good, then both Batmans will sell.
Great points, and I honestly I agree with most of that. The Batman 2 and Batman the Brave and the Bold happening, different timelines really is going to solidify that question. Will audiences be able to understand? And guess what? As one commenter said, it's like the studios don't know that we read Wikipedia. Yeah, we can Google things, we can talk to each other, we can ask questions. We're not going to be confused. It just makes sense. Now, I'm reading some of the comments here. Yeah, the only way to unite the fandom, honestly, yeah. This might be the reason why Gunn has not revealed the new DCU Batman. It's a really good question. You can't compare Clayface to Deadpool, bro. And I think the reason why he's saying that is Clayface is easy to underestimate, but don't forget about the Penguin. Who would have thought that Penguin would be successful? It ended up getting millions of views per episode, millions. And now it's an Oscar winner, and people are demanding for a season two. People are demanding for more Penguin. And in my opinion, before that show, I think Clayface was more popular than the Penguin. I mean, let me know in the comments. What do you think?
I actually agree. Clayface has been in a lot of animated movies in the background. He's been in Young Justice. He was in a few animated projects with Justice League as a background character. And Penguin has not been around since a solo Batman show since probably Batman Brave and the Bold in 2008. So it's been, 10 to 15 years since we've seen Penguin done well, even in an animated series, let alone anything but Clayface we've seen in numerous times. So I agree that before the Penguin, Clayface was the better, or should I say not better, but more popular villain than Penguin. So, and then this movie, this series, and the Batman really improvised on Penguin, how important he is to Batman lore, and I hope that Clayface can do the same thing.
Very good points. Very interesting. And I want to address a comment that someone left here. It was a question. Movie talk now. What is your thoughts on Angry Badger and Hold My DualShock bashing Supergirl, the movie, saying that with James Gunn saying it's going to be like Guardians of the Galaxy? And that's a really good question. One thing I did want to bring up on this stream, I'm so sick of the naysayers that are angry at a project that James Gunn is not involved in. He didn't write Supergirl. He didn't edit Supergirl. He's not involved in the filming of Supergirl. He has no relation to Supergirl after approving the script and making some notes. So him comparing it to Guardians of the Galaxy, remember, Guardians of the Galaxy was not a comedy. Yes, it had comedic elements. Yes, it sometimes leaned into comedy. But when you look at Volume 3, Volume 2, those are not comedies. Okay? So if it's similar to Guardians of the Galaxy in the sense that it's going to bring in different characters, which we know we have Lobo coming in, starring Jason Momoa, and we know he's not even the main bad guy. So we know there's going to be a lot of different characters. We know this is going to be a space adventure, and we know Guardians of the Galaxy was incredibly popular. So comparing Supergirl to a movie that almost made $900 million, just makes sense. But I'm not worried about it being a comedy. I'm not worried about it being silly, and I'm not worried about it being too much like a James Gunn movie. I think it's gonna feel like a unique project. I really, really do. I wanted to address one more comment here, since we're talking about superheroes. So someone is plugging in their own private story. So feel free to check the live chat to see what others are saying about this. So guys, that's our thoughts on this subject. We're going to be moving on, but again, let me know what you guys think about this in the comments. Super, super important, as Warner Brothers Discovery has officially announced they are for sale. This puts James Gunn's DC universe in jeopardy. And at this time, we have Zack Snyder, firing shots at James Gunn's DC universe at a precarious time. And I wanted to say one last thing. One question I've been getting. But David, Zack Snyder and James Gunn are friends. There is no war. There is no battle. I'm sorry, but you don't take shots at your friends at pivotal times when it could literally disrupt or end their livelihood. And I think that's what Zack Snyder has done. Now, don't get me wrong. I think James Gunn has taken some subtle digs at Zack Snyder in the last few years. I really do. So this is not just a one-sided war, but I do think their friendship has dissolved. I do think Zack Snyder wants to tell his story, and I think James Gunn wants to tell his story without Zack Snyder telling his. And because of that, there is this massive conflict that is brewing and growing and festering, and I think it's heating up in real time. And that's why I've been doing so many videos on the topic, because I do think their friendship is over. I do think they are mad at each other. I do think Zack Snyder is going to be taking more subtle shots, especially during this time when there is hope for his universe to live again. That's my thoughts on the subject. Go look at the comments one more time before we move on. Okay, and my guest here, King PG, has a YouTube channel coming on. We're going to be promoting it in the comments and in the description. Has a thought on this subject.
I agree with him in terms of I think the friendship is over. Zack Snyder knows his fan base very well. He definitely knows that any post, anything that he posts out there, the fans are going to react and they're going to be talking about it for weeks or not months. James Gunn, in my opinion, has a huge ego. Anyone that goes against him, he's going to remember it. And he's going to make sure that people know that he's angry. He's not quiet about these things, especially since he just started Universe. It started okay in terms of audience, viewership. So he wants the audience to see his next few projects. It's live or die for him. If Zack Snyder's going to start poking the bear, especially during an acquisition that may happen within the next year, this, as he said, it's a pivotal moment for him. So James Gunn has to show, or he flops. And then this could be an easy way for Zack Snyder to come in and be like, listen, I had a series, an idea that's been brewing for 10 years. Let me finish it. We do know that Justice League, his version, did very well on Netflix. Was it Netflix or HBO?
It was HBO Max.
HBO Max, and it did very well. And people want him to finish at least that vision of Batman and then Justice League 2. Maybe he'll get and 3. So maybe he'll get greenlit. We don't know. But again, this is on James Gunn more than Zack Snyder. If James Gunn fails, that's it. If he does well, then Zack Snyder is just going to be a memory, in my opinion.
And look, I want everyone to understand where I am personally coming from, where my guest is personally coming from. I'm a huge fan of Zack Snyder's work. Anyone who's been following my channel knows I created a motion comic retelling Zack Snyder's Justice League 2 and 3 based on his storyboards. So literally visualizing and animating that story for those who wanted to see where the story was going to go. It's huge on the channel. I recommend it. I'll put those links in the comments as well. You definitely want to check that out. But with that said, I'm excited for James Gunn's DC Universe future. I really am. I think so far the DC Universe has been starting on a good foot. And let's break it down. So first off, technically, the DC Universe timeline began with the Suicide Squad. Because the Suicide Squad is even though it's a slightly different version, is largely canon. And although, remember, the Suicide Squad came out at a time when COVID was happening. So it bombed in the box office. It didn't do well. It lost money. Did well in streaming, but it was very popular. And of course, this was in the heels of Guardians of the Galaxy 3 and his contributions to Avengers Infinity War and Endgame. So obviously, when James Gunn joined the DC universe, there was a lot of excitement. And then, of course, we have Peacemaker season one. I think is James Gunn's best work. I love Peacemaker season one. I think it has a cinematic feel to it. The stakes are super high. But then we go into Peacemaker season two, and that's going to be our next topic. So we're going to continue this conversation, but we're going to start moving on into the little bit more of the specifics of James Gunn's DC universe, talking about Peacemaker season two. We have a lot of thoughts on it. My guest here, King Peachy, just watched it. He just binged it yesterday. So it's fresh on his mind. If I remember correctly, from episode one to the finale, and then, of course, I've been watching it in real time with you guys. And let's break it down. So, first off, my guest before was breaking down how it seems like the viewership went down in popularity. And I want to clarify this story. That story came from Samba TV, who does a good job at monitoring smart TV. So, basically, anything with a smart panel, and most TVs probably have that. Okay. And that's how they measured it. Now, people like me were not measured by Samba TV because I watched it on this iMac with the high resolution, 8K monitor. That's how I watched it the first time. Okay, so the first week I watched it with the monitor, I watched it on the smart TV the second week, so I was not counted. People like me were not counted. Those who watched it on their phone were not counted. So we don't know the full numbers of Peacemaker season two. So I wanted to clarify that. So it does look like episode one was doubled in popularity, but in terms of smart TV viewers, the viewership did go down, and it was less than season one's in terms of the season finale. Now, I do want to put one asterisk. The season finale of Peacemaker season one had the entire Justice League, and there was literally thousands and thousands and thousands of people who tuned in who didn't watch any previous episode just to see the Justice League. So I just want to make that super abundantly clear. The finale of Peacemaker season two had zero cameos. There was a cameo hyped up. It ended up being the band. A lot of people were upset about that. So let's go into it. Let's talk about Peacemaker season two. First off, I want to ask you guys, have you watched it? Let me know in the comments. We have one person, Omar, asking, what is Peacemaker season two about? I haven't watched it. And real quickly, we'll just do a quick premise. We're not going to spoil too much about what happened. But basically, Peacemaker season two is a continuation from season one. Chris, Peacemaker, is trying to find meaning. He attempts to join the Justice Gang. And as the trailers show, it's not successful. And he's trying to connect with Amelia Harcourt and is struggling. His friends are struggling. They're all facing repercussions from exposing the government in season one, and they're all struggling to find work. They're having a hard time finding meaning, and the show really is from that angle. And Chris goes into a new dimension through his dad's wormhole room and starts exploring that dimension. Now, overall, was Peacemaker season two a good show? So first, I want to let my guest answer that question. Then I'm going to go into it. He just watched it fresh, so go from the beginning and go to the end, and let the audience know how you felt about Peacemaker season two.
I I really liked it. In my opinion, I don't think it's as good as season one, but it's definitely, if you're a fan of DC, go watch it. This season also made sure, if anyone even questioned, that Suicide Squad, the events in Suicide Squad was canon. I don't want to say, I think, this movie's been out for a while, so I think I could say that, Rick Flag died, was killed by Peacemaker in Suicide Squad, the second one, not the original Suicide Squad. I don't want anyone to be confused on that. So James Gunn's Suicide Squad is canon to this universe, the new DC universe. And once, and the fallout of Rick Flag dying is one of the most important elements of the story, I would say, from probably episode 3 onward. I'm not going to say who gets involved because I don't want to go to spoil territory, but the death of Rick Flag is one of the reasons why um, that Peacemaker just wants to basically move on from his current universe and explore, like my colleague said here, to see what adventures lies beyond that door. Um, I would say definitely has very good pacing. Every episode was just boom, boom, boom. It never stopped. It never had slow moments. All the characters are fleshed out. No one was forgotten from season one. I was worried that there was going to be just Peacemaker's venture and not explore what happened with the others after the events of season one's ending. I'm glad that they really explored. I mean, going more in detail than I thought they would. And I think all the characters actually grew. There were some characters that was iffy in the first season, but in season two, I end up liking all of them. All of them bring an important element to the team. Team is actually very important in this series because in the last one, it was all about can they work together. This season's all about how strong is their friendship with each other, and I think that really hit me hard because I love when characters are kind of wishy-washy and then they end up being the best for each other. Um, I'm gonna see if my colleague has anything to say. But in the end, I think not as good as season one, but I think it's very important, especially what happens in the end of the season. What they were hinting on, next villain arcs for the DC universe and all that, and the cameos were very interesting. They weren't just thrown in cameos and then let them be forgotten. Especially one certain cameo in the middle of the series, I think he was very important to the rest of the story towards the end. But anyway, again, I don't want to spoil it. Just some thrown hints thrown in there. But let me give a microphone to my colleague for his input.
So what's interesting is Peacemaker season one had a clear antagonist. It was the alien invasion, very clear cut, and then there were some supporting antagonists, such as Amanda Waller, who was subverting the mission and potentially risking the planet. Okay, so very clear cut, very easy to describe what season one was about. Season two, a lot easier, a lot harder. It's a lot harder to say who the antagonist was in Peacemaker season two, which typically, if a fictional project does not have an antagonist, tends not to do so well, right? But it ended up working. But it is interesting to think about that because Rick Flag Sr. was more of an underlying threat. He wasn't an active threat. Yes, he arrested them, but then it resolved on its own, and then he really didn't finally emerge until the finale where he did what he did to Chris and put him in the future jail planet, setting up Apocalypse and Darkseid. We'll talk about that momentarily. But it's really interesting because who really was the antagonist of Peacemaker season two? Was it the Nazis? They didn't play too much of a role. Once they learned about the Nazis, they kind of that plot ended pretty quickly. There was some turning, there was some plot twists on the family dynamic, ended up resolving in their favor. And then, of course, you have Rick Flag Sr. So let me know who you think was the antagonist for Peacemaker season two, because I'm not sure if it really did have one.
I actually have an interesting output. I think the antagonist was Chris himself. I think all the events that's happened was because of Peacemaker's mindset. He was not stable at all. I mean, it was clear in episode one, so I'm trying not to go, spoil territory here. But I think he was himself was the antagonist because all the events that happened was because of his decision on leaving, this dimension, what happened in Suicide Squad. Everything this season was all about what Chris did, and of course, not only did in the past, but his future decisions as well, and that caused stirs between his team and Rick Jr. or Senior and everyone else. It was basically what was Peacemaker doing? Why did he do what he had to do? And why did he do what he did in the past? Almost everyone that was in this series or this season, everything that they were talking about was basically what was that man doing? Why did he do what he did? So let me give back the microphone to my colleague and see what he thought about that thought.
I honestly agree. It does seem like the antagonist for Peacemaker season 2 was Chris himself. He killed himself. He disrupted the family dynamic in Earth X. He It changed Amelia Harcourt's life. Largely everything that happened in terms of protecting Peacemaker's, you know, situation in season 1 and making him a wanted person, all of that and blaming the dad and all of that unfolded was because of Chris. So everything in season 2 happened because of Chris. So really, he was his worst enemy in this show. So, guys, I want to hear your thoughts in the comments. Let me know what you thought about Peacemaker season 2, and we're gonna go from there. Now, we're gonna move on to the next topic, and this is a really important topic. And I want King Peachy to address this topic first, okay? And this is a very important topic. Is Godzilla evil? Okay, so we're gonna hold on one second. I just want to change the screen here. So, guys, this is a topic we have been debating here. Is Godzilla, is he evil? Is Godzilla evil? Okay, we're gonna take a look at that. Is Godzilla evil in this conversation? I want you to comment below and let me know what you think. So first, we're gonna go era by era, and then we're gonna start winding this down and answering some comments. Okay, so first off, let's talk about the monster versus Godzilla, the Godzilla that everyone is familiar with, okay? Is the monster versus Godzilla evil? And in my opinion, he is an anti-hero. He's not good, nor evil. He just is, right? We have seen him kill hundreds and hundreds of people without second questioning it. Now, keep in mind, if you look at some of the lore behind Godzilla, the MonsterVerse, he knows what people are. He was once worshipped by people. So there was once a time when the monster versus Godzilla was not going after anybody. He was not attacking anybody. He was actually protecting people. So he actually went through evolutions himself that completely changed his, perspective on humans, which is why I say he is definitely not a hero. He knows who people are. He's once protected them and now he's killing them. So it's pretty clear he lives a very indifferent lifestyle, but at the end of the day, he is going to protect the planet and he's going to stop any threat. So before we move on to Godzilla's, what do you think about the monster versus Godzilla? Is he evil?
No, I think he's a force of nature, and I think they said in King of the Monsters, he is the balance for the planet. As he said, he was worshipped. I mean, there's literally temples underwater when they found his lair. There's carvings, and that's where he actually slept. Also, to get to heal himself and to regenerate. Clearly, there was radioactivity down there, so clearly something was going on with that whole temple, and it was very interesting. Maybe one day we'll get more lore on that. But also, he knows what he's doing. When he got hit with the nuclear bomb in King of the Monsters, and he rose out of the ground, he looked directly at the people. He knew that they were helping him, and that's when Godzilla turned around and went for the enemy, which was Ghidorah at the time. And as he was entering the city, planes was following all around him, and he didn't bat an eye. And it depends if he's mad. If he's mad, then he'll go right for the airplanes, which he did in Godzilla versus King Kong. So he knows exactly what he's doing, and he knows his enemy very clear, but he also knows when to not attack. When he locked the Kongs down in Hollow Earth, he knew exactly what he was doing. He trapped them there. When he was fighting King Kong and Mothra came to stop them, he looked at Mothra and said, "Okay, no more fighting," because he's not stupid. He knows exactly what to do during certain situations. So, in my opinion, no, he's not evil. He's just the balance for the Earth.
Well said. And I don't think there is anything else to say about the monster versus Godzilla. So let's continue to the different eras of Godzilla. So let's talk about the original Godzilla. And I have a feeling we're going to agree more so in this version. This Godzilla was not evil. He was more so like a force of nature. And I say that for a few reasons. There were some supplemental novels and some supplemental lore that goes into the original Godzilla. And it implies that he once was part of a family. in basically the Hollow Earth, and he was the last survivor, and he radiated into Godzilla, and he's in uncontrollable pain and sadness and anguish, and his goal is just to go after and seek revenge on Japan. It is a little bit evil though. It has evil intentions, but it is more so of like, you know, you poked a bear and the bear is coming back at you. It really is nature just responding. There wasn't too much of premeditation or thought or anything like that. I mean, what do you think? Do you think the original Godzilla is evil? I mean, we've seen him literally aim at people, looking down at the street, picking off people. So he's not just destroying the city and not realizing that there's like ants being destroyed. No, he was hunting people. So do you think the original Godzilla was evil?
Yes and no. I think it's more as revenge. That humans basically destroyed his life when he was probably a peaceful animal. But when he transformed into Kiru and his soul, awoken, and you saw those red eyes, in my opinion, that's evil coming out again. Or maybe in Godzilla's mind is, oh man, I'm being used again for human purposes. So the first thing he did was attack that plane and then started destroying the city. And he knew exactly what he was doing. I mean, he awoken and he did nothing but made sure that that city was destroyed before the battery cells went away. And then of course in Tokyo SOS, he came to stop or maybe save Godzilla, depending on what your input is on that ending. But he knew exactly what he was doing. He saw the people, the humans, try to kill his brethren or his son, and he said no. He took him to the sea, and that was it. So it seems like this Godzilla, at least the original, has evil intent, at least only towards humans. That anything that humans want, he'll do the opposite of. So, in my opinion, towards the human, yes, but he had every good reason to because his life was destroyed even after death.
I agree. So let me know what you guys think in the comments. And we're going to move on to the Showa era Godzilla, which is, again, the original Godzilla era is Showa era, but let's talk about the second Godzilla. The second Godzilla is really interesting because he evolved unlike most Godzillas. He went from a bumbling idiot to a species that had a universal language that it understood among other kaijus. It planned, it celebrated, it showed empathy, it began learning human gestures, so he became really intelligent. Really, he basically went from Hawk to a girl level intelligence to Neil deGrasse Tyson in terms of exponential growth. He wasn't even able to read, imagine Hawk to a girl trying to do anything, pass a Blue's Clues level. That was basically Godzilla trying to figure anything out. And then you have him at the end of his series by Terror of Mechagodzilla by Destroy All Monsters, and he's incredibly intelligent. So major leaps of intelligence. So was the second Godzilla evil? Well, I'm gonna say he was evil because he knew. They say defining evil is knowing what you're doing and doing it anyway. And we saw the second Godzilla evolve to a point where he spoke a language, and when Mothra was trying to convince him and Rodan to help save the Earth, Godzilla bashed people in the universal kaiju language. He basically said that people were not worth protecting. He doesn't like people, meaning every time that Godzilla went on a rampage and killed people, he knew exactly what he was doing. But then he evolved. And there's a lot of theories about that. Some people say his travels in space, you know, the amount of time that passed for Godzilla was not the same amount of time that passed on Earth. So it's possible more time passed in space and Godzilla's mind and body evolved because really by the time he came back on Earth, he totally changed his perspective. He became a defender of people. He came ashore when people needed help. He defended Japan. He defended the planet. And he became a hero. So he literally was a villain turned hero. I don't think he was a force of nature. Love to hear what you guys have to think, and I'm going to ask my guest what he thinks about the second Godzilla. Was he evil?
Yes and no. I mean, let's talk about the first movie that he was introduced, Godzilla Raids Again. I mean, right there in the title, he's raids again. He's coming for everyone, and he literally fought and killed the first monster he laid eyes on, and that was Anguirus, which later becomes his friend. Interesting take on that. But Godzilla knew exactly what he's doing in that movie. I mean, he went to Osaka, I believe that was the city in Raids Again, and he burned that city to the ground, just like 54 did with the original Tokyo. And he basically bled Anguirus by his neck. He bit him in his neck and made sure that he bled out and he roasted his carcass. Then, of course, he got frozen by the humans and then he went dormant for about 6 to 8 years until we saw him in King Kong. Then King Kong, literally again, he knew what he was doing. He was chasing, trains. He was going to city. Of course, he, in my opinion, he was making fun of King Kong, but he was a record, he was a force of nature in that movie. Then, of course, in Mothra, he went after the city after coming out of the ground. He destroyed everything. He went after the egg. He went after the military. He was a savage in that movie. Even with the Mothra larva, he didn't bat an eye. He wanted to kill them. Then, of course, we went to Ghidorah, the three-headed monster. In my opinion, this was the turning point. I think once Mothra was trying to talk to Godzilla and reason with him, he started opening his mind because in the beginning of that movie, he was acting like how he was in the other previous films. He was attacking the city. He wasn't doing funny gestures. He was after Rodan. I mean, going from town to town, Rodan and him were just fighting nonstop for days, if I remember correctly, that movie. Until Mothra came and changed both of their minds. So they teamed up against Ghidorah and he ran away. Then of course we went to Monster Zero, where again Mothra was not there, but Rodan was there, and they already became friends at that point, and together they defeated Ghidorah again. So at that point, that was the turning point. I think Mothra, in my opinion, changed Godzilla's mind to be more reasonable, and Godzilla gave Rodan a chance to be friends, and they did it without having issues, defeating Ghidorah a second time. And then what's after that film? Godzilla had a son. So I think it's a combination of having a son, mellowing him out because we know how Minna acts, very joyful, very, he cares about humans. He did it in front of Godzilla numerous times and saving, the natives on that island. And of course, Mothra getting in his head that not all people and not all monsters are evil. So I think it's a combination of that because right after Son of Godzilla, he was a full-blown hero. So let me give the mic to my colleague and see what he thinks about that.
It makes sense. So that's our thoughts on the show of Godzilla, 1 and 2. Let us know in the comments what you think. Is Godzilla evil? Now let's talk about the Heisei and Millennium era's Godzilla, because there's a lot of parallels because they both start off very similar. The Millennial Godzilla from Godzilla 2000, Mega Gearus, Godzilla against Mega Godzilla 3, Tokyo SOS behaved very similar to Godzilla from the Heisei era in '84, Biollante, King Ghidorah, Mechagodzilla 2, in the sense that they kept coming back to Japan and they attacked it seemingly without rhyme or reason. Sometimes it was for nuclear energy, other times it was to fight an antagonist, and sometimes there was no real reason, right? Godzilla just came ashore to cause havoc, to fight the military, to let his anger out and cause problems. And I think particularly the Heisei era Godzilla was an anti-villain. I think he showed some traits that were evil, meaning he knew what he was doing and he did it anyway. An example was in Godzilla versus King Ghidorah, where he faces off against a man who never harmed him. He actually helped him and praised him and worshipped him in a way. Someone he saw when he was a Godzillasaurus, and Godzilla met him again when he became a Godzilla, made eye contact with him, roared, and then ended his life. And I think that was quite evil. And Godzilla knew who people were, knew what people were capable of, and he always went after them to the end of his life. Now, he did evolve, he adopted, he showed signs of intelligence, but that's kind of where we are. So, what do you think about the Heisei era Godzilla? Obviously, I think his son, who was raised partially by humans, is a hero, never attacked people, never caused problems. But let me know what your thoughts on the Heisei and Millennium era before we go to the Final Wars era Godzilla and finish this live stream.
I think I'm gonna have this way he was similar to Showa in terms of the moment he got a son, he changed. But let me go back really quick because there is, in my opinion, two versions of Heisei. One, 84 and Biollante. I think, in my opinion, that version he was evil. I mean, he never blinked an eye. He never cared about anything. He just kept shooting these beams throughout the cities, destroying monsters that was in his way, and that was it. And then of course we all know that in Ghidorah '91, the humans changed the timeline. Godzilla grew. I think he also evolved. I think he probably got a bigger brain. I mean, he grew from 80 meters to 100. I think he just himself overall just changed. And then we saw Godzilla slowly evolve until he got to being his son. And then once he got his son, he changed completely from Mechagodzilla 2 to Space Godzilla when he actually, cared about his son. He held him when Space Godzilla was about to kill him. He didn't seem like he was out to kill humans. I mean, at sometimes he saved Mogera in that fight, so he knew what he was doing. And then, of course, in Destroyer, he went out saving the whole world basically. So, in my opinion, just like Showa, once he got a son, I think Godzilla's thought process changed. I think pre Ghidorah, 84 balance, he was evil. And of course, King Ghidorah's evolution when he evolved in that movie. From then on, I think he bettered himself when he once he got a son. I'm gonna give my the camera the microphone back.
Okay, so we have some disagreement. So let me know what you guys think in the comments. Is Godzilla evil? And we're gonna end it here with Final Wars Godzilla. He really ended kind of like the Toa era before Shin Godzilla and Godzilla minus one, and who are more, animalistic. They're more like the original Godzilla, or, you know, it's very similar, very interesting. Definitely let me know what you guys think in the comments. But Final Wars Godzilla seemed like he was also an anti-villain, and a perfect example of that was when the grandpa and the grandson saw Godzilla after defeating an enemy attacking the city and ending more lives, and the grandson said, "Why is Godzilla doing that?" And the grandpa answered, "Well, Godzilla's angry at people for what happened, for making him Godzilla, for continuing to do what they do." And Godzilla never forgave them. So Godzilla knew what he was doing, always went after people, and he had to be trapped for a reason because he was beyond a hurricane, beyond a force of nature. He was just a demonic threat almost, but then he ended up being Earth's biggest protector because he was an anti-villain. So what do you think? Do you think Godzilla Final Wars was a hero or a villain?
I think he was out for revenge, like Showa. Well, so not Showa 54. Even after when he was released from his ice dome prison, um, they even said that he thinks that last fight is still going on. That's the quote from the greatest Russian in that movie. And he wanted revenge on the Gortenga and the humans for not just entrapping him, but for what the humans did to him. But again, in the end of the film, what stopped him from killing the humans? His son. Seems to be a big thing with his son in all these movies is that his son is what basically changed them. But I think we're forgetting one of the most important Godzillas that we skipped. I think we're talking about GMK.
Okay.
In my opinion, I think he's the most evil Godzilla of all of them. I mean, he was the souls of all the fallen heroes in World War II. He was made out of people that thought that Japan forgotten them. In my opinion, he was created out of hate. And in my opinion, GMK Godzilla is the worst of the worst and is true evil incarnate.
Honestly, I agree. GMK Godzilla is literally evil personified. GMK Godzilla literally targeted people. Everything he did was to to end the lives of other kaijus or people or anything he saw breathing. And there wasn't a single redeeming quality from GMK Godzilla. 100% pure evil, possibly the most evil version of Godzilla we have ever seen. So, guys, I want to thank all of you for tuning in. This was an awesome live stream. Thank you for, you know, forgive us for some of the hiccups early on. This is going to be, again, a weekly or bi weekly show. So, you're going to see a lot of those things work itself out. And we're going to be having the topics announced beforehand so you guys can be prepared yourselves and join in on the conversation. This was a lot of fun. So, I want to thank every single person for attending this live chat. And any last words from my guest?
No, just thank you for listening to us. I'll be opening my channel very soon, so I hope to interact with all you guys there.